So let's recap the major changes we just made to the Miwok app. We changed from using a loop to populate a vertical linear layout to display a list of words to using a more efficient list view plus ArrayAdapter combination. And then we built a list item layout that contains 2 text views. So next we wanted to create a single list of objects that we could pass to the ArrayAdapter. So we created a custom word class that contains both the English and Miwok translations for a single word. With that, we could have an array list of word objects that we could pass to an ArrayAdapter. Now let's navigate to the numbers activity. Here we'll need to change our array list of strings into an array list of words. So we need to update the generic type parameter, what's in between those brackets, and create an array list where each element is a word object. So when you type in word here, you might get 2 autocomplete suggestions. And this is because the word class already exists in the Android framework under a different package name. So here you'll see it's under user dictionary. So these are words that you can add to your autocomplete dictionary, say when you're messaging your friends. So be sure to pick the correct option for the word class. We want the one that's in our package, com.example.android.miwok. So now we've updated our array list to contain word objects instead of string objects. So remember that by specifying word as the parameter of the array list, this means that when we add elements to the list, we'll need to add objects of data type word. And if we were to say call the get method, which is used for getting elements at a specific position in the list, we'll receive an object with a data type word. So currently all these add methods are adding a single string object to the words list each time. And that's why we're getting all these errors. So we need to update each of these lines to pass in a single word object. So let's just focus on this first element here. So I'm going to comment it out. So below it, I'm going to write in the version of the code where we're adding in a new word object to the words list. This is a typical way to go about this. We would have created a new word object, stored it in a variable here called w, and then added that variable to our words list. So note here that when we're creating our new word object, we're passing in 2 inputs into the constructor, so the English and Miwok words. So since we only need to reference this w variable once here, there's actually a more concise way to write these 2 lines of code. So this method of creating a word object and adding it to the list does work, but there's actually a more concise way to do it. So you'll notice here that we only reference this variable w once, down here. So we can go ahead and actually cut out this instantiation of the word object and paste it directly into the add method. So doing it this way, we don't need this extra step up here to create a new word object on a separate line of code and then store it into a temporary variable. So we can actually go ahead and just remove this line completely. Instead, we've directly added our new word object into the list. So to summarize, the input into this list is a new word object, which is created in line by using the new keyword. I'm going to go ahead and finish populating the array list with the word objects. Alright, when you're all done, this is what the code for creating an array list of words should look like. So let's move down here to where we're passing our array list into the adapter now. So we'll need to update this generic type from string to be words. And this change reflects that the ArrayAdapter now contains a list of words as its data source instead of strings. We'll also need to update the layout resource to be our new list item layout. So instead of this, we'll have r.layout.listItem. Alright, so there's no errors in the code now, so I'm going to go ahead and run the app on my device. Alright, so here's the emulator running this version of the app. Let's navigate into the numbers activity. Ooh, the app just crashed. I wonder what happened. Let's check out the Android monitor and check out the Android logs. Well, at the very top of the log message, we see here that it says java.lang.illegal state exception. ArrayAdapter requires the resource ID to be a text view. I'm not exactly sure what this error means, so I'm going to have to go into the documentation and see if I can find any clues. Here's the developer documentation for the ArrayAdapter. So let's read through the class overview. Alternatively, you can also pause the video here if you want to read through it yourself. So what I've learned from these couple paragraphs is by default, the class expects that the provided resource ID references a single text view. So that's probably why the list item layout from the Android framework itself worked, because the whole layout just consisted of a single text view. And here in this next paragraph, we see that we can also add lists or arrays of custom objects. So that's perfect for us to help display our custom word objects. Now all this makes sense because remember that the ArrayAdapter uses generics, which means that we can substitute any object data type in here for this T. Now moving down to the third paragraph, in order to display more complicated list items that contain more than a single text view, we'll need to override and provide our own implementation of the getView method. So ListView calls the adapter's getView method when it needs a new view on the screen. And one of the input arguments into the method is the desired element of the list. So in this case, we have position 0 that we need. Knowing this information, the adapter returns a view to the list view that's populated with the information from the position 0. So think of the relationship between the list view and get view similar to what happens between a surgeon and a surgical technician in an operating room. So in this analogy, the surgical technician, like the get view, hands the surgeon the list view, the correct instrument, or the correct view when the time comes. So the list view or surgeon requests for the view, or the scissors in this case. The get view gets what's needed, the view, or in this case the scissors, and passes it to the surgeon. So by default, the ArrayAdapter class expects that it will be populating a single text view. So because the list item layout that we will be populating is more complex, so it has 2 text views, and then eventually it will have an image view, we need to override the getView method with our own custom behavior. And in order to do this, we need to subclass the ArrayAdapter class. So to elaborate, this means we need to create a new Java class. So we'll call it the WordAdapter class, and it needs to extend the ArrayAdapter class. So I'll show you how to get that done now. So let's navigate over here to the project view, select our package, right-click, New, and Java class. So we want to name this file WordAdapter. We'll need to modify this auto-generated file from Android Studio. We want this class declaration to specify that the WordAdapter extends or inherits behavior from the ArrayAdapter class. Now to show the available methods to override from the ArrayAdapter class, our cursor will have to be between these 2 brackets. We'll hit code and then override methods. Alternatively, our keyboard shortcut is Control-O. Now in this list here, go down and find getView and then click enter. Alright, so this method gets auto-generated by default. Now I'm going to take a step back and let you finish the steps that are needed to make this app display the list of vocabulary words for the numbers activity. So the steps will include finishing the implementation of the getView method. When you're done with this entire quiz, the app should look like this. Each list item should display a Miwok word on top of the English translation for that word. Now to help verify you're on track, I'm going to provide you with some code changes that are needed in the numbers activity. So instead of the ArrayAdapter, we'll be using a WordAdapter. So the constructor for the WordAdapter class takes in 2 inputs. So just the context and this list of words. And then also remember to update the adapter variable down here. Now make sure your WordAdapter class works with these number activity changes. Otherwise, you'll need to go back and fix your WordAdapter class. Now I know this coding exercise will be a bit of a challenge because you've never created a custom ArrayAdapter before, or even overridden the getView method. This task involves many steps, but I think you're definitely ready for this. Now just be patient with yourself, because this task will require a bit of time. To give you another hint, I'll point you to an example app which handles a similar use case. So this project here is hosted on GitHub as an open source project, and this means that the code is available for anyone to take a look at. So note that there's a different license on each open source project. So remember to check out the license for limitations on whether the code can be modified or distributed again if you're taking a look at a particular open source project. So in this case, this app was created at Udacity, so you're free to use it and adapt it as you wish. So our custom adapter sample app is called the Android Flavors app, and it displays a list of all Android releases. So each release is represented in a list item, and each list item contains an image, a title, and the version number. So this app is using a custom array adapter that we're calling the flavor adapter to display a custom list item view that contains an image and 2 text views. So we're having you practice the skill of reading code from other apps and figuring out how to adapt it into our Miwok app. So as a developer, you'll often look at tutorials or other open source apps and try to apply those skills into your own application. So you can start browsing this Android Flavor app code by either clicking this download zip button and downloading all the code and then importing it into Android Studio as an existing project. Or you can browse the files directly in the web browser. So for example, I can click here app, source/main, and then navigate through the Java files or the res files. Another cool GitHub shortcut here is to type T on my keyboard. So I'll hit T here, and that activates the file finder. So this allows me to easily browse through the files in my project. So if I want to look up that main activity, I can type activity, and this pulls up our main activity.java. Or if I want to search up the flavor adapter that I mentioned earlier, I can easily find that here. So hopefully this example will help you in the next coding exercise. So check out the quiz for specific instructions on how to get started. And best of luck!